Good evening. Good evening. I'm Siobhan Shugman, the Peterson Business Librarian. I'm delighted to welcome you to Greenwich Library for our Peterson Business Lecture this evening. Events like this are made possible through the support of the Greenwich Library Board of Trustees and the Peterson Foundation. A few reminders. Please silence your cell phone and refrain from using it and taking any photos during the event. We will have ample time for Q&A, so please start thinking of your questions for Seth now. We will have microphones that will be brought to you for questions. Afterwards, every attendee will be given 2 complimentary copies of This Is Strategy, one for you and one to share with a friend. Distribution of books will occur in the lobby, where there will also be an opportunity to have your book signed. So with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce a truly iconic voice in the worlds of marketing, leadership, and creativity, Seth Godin. Seth is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and globally recognized speaker. He's written over 20 best-selling books, including Purple Cow, Tribes, The Dip, and This Is Marketing, a book that quickly became an international bestseller. His latest work, This Is Strategy, released in 2024, was featured in Harvard Business Review and has already become a nationwide bestseller. In addition to his influential writing, Seth authors one of the most popular blogs in the world, where he shares daily insights that challenge conventional thinking and spark real change. He's also the founder of 2 pioneering companies, Yoyodyne, acquired by Yahoo, and Squidoo, and is widely credited with inventing permission-based email marketing. Seth has delivered 5 TED Talks, with 2 ranking among the most viewed of all time. And in 2018, he was inducted into the Marketing Hall of Fame. His work doesn't just inform, it inspires. Whether he's writing about marketing, the power of ideas, or what it means to lead with significance, Seth Godin challenges us all to think differently and act boldly. Please join me in welcoming Seth Godin.
Howdy. Thank you for coming. I got a lot I want to talk about. Mostly, I want to talk about what you want to talk about, so we're going to do a lot of Q&A. There's a prize for the best question. We'll talk about that later. But before we start with that, I want to talk about golf. It's May, June. What month is this? June. And it's golf season. Golf is the worst spectator sport ever invented. Nothing good ever happens. If something good does happen, you're not allowed to wildly applaud. You have to do that stupid little golf clap. So let's start with the worst anemic golf clap you can muster, please. Thank you. Can you double it? Double it again? And one more time. Perfect. Thank you. So I want to argue that's what we do when we're trying to make change. That's what we do when we're trying to lead. That's what we do when we're trying to be part of a community. We find small little threads of interest. We reflect them, we weave them back, we make connection, we amplify, and we do it again. And in the last 20 or 30 years, the ability of anybody who wants to make a change happen in a community large or small is greater than it has been in recorded history. And largely we've wasted that opportunity making cat videos or watching them instead. And the arc of my work is to help people do work that matters for people who care. And a big part of it is helping people see that they are authorized to do this work. We've been indoctrinated from a very young age at some very fancy schools, some of which are right near here, to sit in straight rows, to do what we're told, to get an A. When a 7-year-old comes home with their report card from 2nd grade, the parent rewards them for getting good grades. Why? They're 7. What is being measured here? Well, it's part of a system. And my new book is about systems. It's about being able to see systems and understand systems, dance with systems, and figure out what your role is within the system. But none of it works if you're stuck in a mindset of golf. Because golf is this asymptotic exercise where you're just trying to be a little bit more perfect. That when they change the location of a hole on the golf course, it's a big deal because golf is supposed to be the same. That's not the way surfing works. Surfing, every wave is different. It's supposed to be that way. A world surfing champion actually built a surfing facility in California, and he flooded a farm and put in a train, and the train has a snowplow in the front, and it plows through the water and makes the same wave every time. And that's an interesting way to train, but surfers don't really like it that much. Because the entire point of surfing is that each wave is going to be different than the wave before. So if you grew up in an industrial mindset, in an industrial era, if you grew up wanting to follow the instructions and getting all the prizes and rewards that come with that, it's stressful when they change the instruction. And that is what is happening all around us. So a little aside about Lego. The Lego company had principles. They were all written down. There's 10 rules of Lego. And one of the rules is every piece has to do multiple things. Each piece of Lego has to fit every other piece of Lego. And this worked great for 40 or 50 years. And then Lego began to spiral toward bankruptcy. It was very close to going out of business because parents stopped buying their kids Lego. Because Lego is an open-ended, creative endeavor. And some guy at Lego invented Lego kits. And Lego kits saved the company. And the way a Lego kit works is there's only one way to put it together properly. And a Lego kit is training for the industrial age. It's training to be taught to follow the instructions. And that's what parents indoctrinated their kids to do, because it's what they were indoctrinated to do. And now we fast forward to 2025, and here's AI. And either you're going to work for AI or AI is going to work for you. And if you decide to go to work for AI, it's not going to be fun, because it's a race to the bottom. Because it's better and faster and cheaper at doing tasks than you will ever be. On the other hand, if you put AI to work for you, your job is to figure out what your job is. And that's not easy to do. So, where does strategy come into all of this? About 100 years ago, Western Union had a chance to buy AT&T for not a lot of money. And they decided not to. They spent the money to make better telegrams instead. And in 1999, when I worked at Yahoo, I was not in the room, it's not my fault. In 1999, when I worked at Yahoo, they had the chance to buy Google for $10 million. And in both cases, the companies were sticking to their strategy and felt like they did the right thing because they didn't realize the system was changing. AI, like Claude and ChatGPT, most of the foundational ideas were invented by Google. And Google did not launch it because, as we're already seeing, it undermined the business that they built their system around. Kodak had most of the foundational patents for digital photography. My friend Lisa sold her company to Kodak, and she was an advisor on the digital side. She's sitting in Rochester in the chairman or the CEO's office, and she's making the pitch that in this moment, 20-something years ago, if Kodak pivots, because the system is changing, the system that is built on photomats and film and cameras and all the other pieces, they shift. With their reputation and their resources, they could just clean up. And he says to her, I'm getting some of the facts of the story wrong. He says, Lisa, do you know how many steps are involved in making a roll of film? Lisa says, I have no idea. He says, 19. 19, come over here. And they look at the window. They're on the 5th floor. It's this big skyscraper in Rochester. It's 5th floor. And they're on the 5th floor. He says, look out on the Kodak campuses. How many buildings do you see? 19. He couldn't scroll back film just a little because the entire thing was purpose-built to do what the system wanted. One more. Many of you are either in or adjacent to the book business. For 485 years, the book business was the same. Gutenberg comes out with the printing press, and the hard part after that isn't printing the book, it's selling the book. You need bookstores. Well, once bookstores are built, they're full. And the only way for a new book to get distribution is for an old book to come off the shelf. Therefore, the entire structure of the industry is about comforting and supporting bookstores so they will take old books off the shelf and put your book in. That's why there's no 800 number on the back of any book you buy, because they don't want you to call them. They want the bookstore to talk to them. The whole institution is built around shelf space and distribution and bookstores. And that worked great until 25 years ago. And some guy shows up and he says, you know what? We're going to have a bookstore that has unlimited shelf space. We don't have to take any books away to add another book. And you know what? Half the books we sell are either going to be on the Kindle or on Audible. And those cost nothing to produce in quantity, and we're going to keep most of the profit. The industry hasn't woken up yet. That if 35 years ago, Simon & Schuster and Random House had said, you know what we do for a living? We organize the world's information. They could have started Google, because Google was started by 2 people. They did not do that, because they said, well, you know what we do for a living? We chop down trees and put books in independent bookstores. And when the system changes, it doesn't feel fair. But the system doesn't care about you. The system, which hides behind culture, which hides behind normal, has always been changing. All of you have jobs that were invented at the expense of the generation of jobs before you that were furious that what you do for a living was even invented. The ditch diggers were not happy when the steam shovel showed up. So we have to learn to look for the system first, and then we have to say, what is going to change this system? How much does a wedding in Greenwich cost? I'm guessing the average wedding in Greenwich costs $150,000. Why does it cost $150,000? Because that's how much your daughter's best friend's wedding cost plus the $1,000. It's not that anyone's being mean or evil. That's the purpose of the system. The wedding industrial complex is designed as an adjudicator of status and affiliation, showing that we know how to fit in and where we are in whatever hierarchy we're in. It's not a better marriage if you have a $150,000 wedding than if you just order from Domino's and go to the Rotary Club. It's just different because people like us do things like this. The TV industrial complex, the wedding industrial complex, these are all systems that are hiding in plain sight. If you have an 18-year-old and they decide not to go to college, suddenly you're on the defensive. You have to explain to all of your peers what you did wrong as a parent. Because this system, which is 400 years old, has determined this is the way it is. That's not the way it used to be. The number of people who went to college was tiny. And it is possible to be very happy and successful without going, but the system is deeply ingrained. So when we look around the world now, when we look at what is happening, wherever we want to look, we see that technology and culture, this generative, creative destruction, faster and faster and faster, is undoing systems that we took for granted. That when they launched the car in Germany, Mercedes and Co., there were no roads, there were no gas stations, there was no one with a driver's license. They should have waited until everything was ready and then launched the car. That's not what happened. Like, how do you persuade someone to buy a car if there are no gas stations? But then a new system kicks in. And what we have to do, if we're going to change any system, whether it's a little tiny community system inside of Greenwich or a nationwide or worldwide system, is figure out if we have enough kindling to light the log on fire that we need to change. Because it doesn't make any sense for you to say you're going to transform education worldwide and you're going to do it with a homeschooled situation for 4 people. You don't have enough time or resources to change worldwide schooling with that kind of kindling, right? On the other hand, when my friend Sal Khan built the Khan Academy, he has transformed the way more than 5 million people have learned things. Because when technology showed up, he was able to put a new system on top of the old system. So the first thing is making sure we have enough kindling. The second thing is identifying the smallest viable audience. What's the fewest number of people that if they knew what we were doing and they engaged in what we were doing, it would be enough? How do we put ourselves on the hook? Not for how do we reach everyone, but for how do we reach enough? Because if you can create that red hot center, that group of people who would miss you if you were gone, it becomes fuel for the next time and the next time. What happens if you find that smallest viable audience and you help them get to where they want to go? Is they will tell their friends. They will tell the others. Their status will be improved because they talk about you. Not because you want them to, but because they want to. So the easy way to remember this is Dorothy didn't tell the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion how badly she wanted to go back to Kansas. That's not how she got them to go with her to the Emerald City. What she told them is they could get what they wanted if they accompanied her on the journey. And that is what we need. We need enrollment. We need people who want to come with us to make the change happen. And to do that, we need to build scaffolding. We need to make handholds. We need to create the conditions for the people we are shepherding to be able to confidently bring along the next cycle of people, and then the group after that, and then the group after that. So when we put all of these pieces together, and now I'm going to get to your questions, but I want to just talk about a couple other things first, is we realize we have an opportunity, which means we have an obligation. And that opportunity we have is to make things better, to do work that matters for people who care. Not to just watch social media and wring our hands about all of the trauma that is going on in the world. We need to make it better, but that's not our work. Our work is to start with a circle that gives us the benefit of the doubt. A circle of people who trust us. A circle of people we can engage with. And to work with systems that are there, or systems that are changing, or systems that are about to be there. To create the conditions for others to join in what we're doing. And it's going to be very hard for each of you to fully see this until you do the work to look for it. Because the indoctrination that got you here, the pattern of success that landed you in Greenwich, Connecticut is real. It's solid. It's a foundation. But at the same time, we all know deep down that that cycle, that system that got us here is going away. It's going away very quickly. And generations are being replaced because that's what always happens. And we can either fight that and yell at the greenskeeper for moving the hole, or we can realize that we are here to surf. That surfing is the act of picking the right wave and finding an elegant strategy, a way to stand, a way to head, so that the wind is at our back, so that the current is pushing us in the direction that we want to go. So the last mini story I'll tell you, and then we're going to do questions, is this. Every 3 years, there's a conference of physicists. It's called the Solvay Conference. The most important one happened in 1927. 29 physicists were invited, including Marie Curie, who is super famous, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr. It's said that Heisenberg was there, but it's uncertain. And the cool thing about it is that 17 of the 29 people at that conference won the Nobel Prize in physics. And almost all of them won it after the conference. You didn't get invited to Solvay because you won the Nobel Prize. You won the Nobel Prize because you were part of the circle of people who were at Solvay. And it's easy to imagine that change comes from away. Change comes from Silicon Valley, or change comes from who knows where, Washington. But it's not true. Change comes from whatever room you're in, if you can be the person who organizes that, who says, I'm going over there, who wants to come. It's not about authority. It's about taking the chance to be responsible, to put up a beacon and say, hey, I'm going over there. My friend Shalene had a great sentence, which is, there's no question you're going to succeed. Everyone in this room has already succeeded. The question is, will you choose to matter? So that's what I came to talk about. I got plenty of time for questions. Here's what makes a good question. A good question is a question that other people want to ask but are afraid to. And it's one that when other people hear the answer, will be glad you asked it. So if you got a question like that, long or short, trivial or giant, I would love to take it on. So thank you for coming. What do you want to talk about? Right up here.
Thank you so much, Seth. So a lot of what we do at our business is we're a B2C company in a very niche industry, and we're online marketing. I've seen it go from advertising to inbound. Now AI is at the top of the Google page. Where should we be looking next and ways to innovate to get found in this next wave?
Great question. Okay, so TV was a miracle because if you had the guts to buy TV ads, you would make enough money to buy more TV ads. And if you look at the great brands of the 60s, they didn't make great products. They didn't even make great commercials. They just bought a lot of commercials. You're soaking in Palmolive. What's that about? I don't know, right? But if you ran enough commercials, you were going to do fine. And a whole bunch of people came along thinking that they were really smart, when actually all they did was run a lot of commercials. And then cable shows up, and then the internet shows up. So to give you an example, an episode of The Monkees was regularly seen by between 50 and 60 million people. The last episode of Succession, which was hyped to here, was seen by 3 million people. 1/20th the number. That's not progress in terms of scale, right? Google is a miracle. And for 25 years, if you had the guts to buy the right keywords on Google, you could make enough money to buy more keywords. And if you got lucky the way I did and someone typed in the word blog, I was the first match for 7 years. That's why I have a lot of people reading my blog. My blog is pretty good, but it also helped that I got all this free traffic. It's gone. It's over. The same way the monkeys are over. That Google couldn't launch AI because they knew this was going to happen, but once other people did it, they had no choice. So there it is on the homepage, and the clicks that people are getting from Google are now down 30 or 40%. And well-meaning, hardworking people who were in the system, playing according to the rules, are now saying to me, how do we get found? How do we get the word out? And the answer is, another miracle is not showing up this time. The other miracles came at just the right moment, but not this time. Because attention is more precious than ever before and more fractionalized than ever before, and people do not want it strip-mined by people who are doing promotion. I don't use the word marketing, I use the word promotion. Promotion is harder than ever before. It's really hard to put up enough flyers to get people to come to your garage sale. And what's easier than ever before is marketing. Marketing is making something people want to talk about. Because if other people talk about it, you're going to get found. But that means you have to make something different. You have to bring it to the world differently. So why does everyone here get 2 copies of the book, not 1 copy of the book? Because if you get 2 copies of the book, you feel bad throwing one out, I hope. So you're going to give it to somebody else. I've created the conditions for you to have a conversation, which is why I wrote the book in the first place. And so if you make average stuff for average people and hope to get found, it's not going to happen. But if you can build something that works better if I tell my friends, I will tell my friends. So the last example of this is a restaurant in New York you may have been to called Carmine's. Carmine's was super popular for a long time. What's their secret? Food wasn't that good. Prices weren't that good. Secret number 1, more garlic than any human should ever consume. And what that meant was when you went to work the next day, it had to be discussed. Secret number 2, bigger portions than any human could ever consume. So when you wanted to discuss it, you had something to say. And number 3, can't get a reservation unless you have a party of 6 or more. So if you want to go, you got to get 5 people to go with you. They built the network effect into the product. It's not hard to make spaghetti, but it's hard to make a crowd. And they made a crowd. So that's your work. Not to get the word out about what you've been doing, but to do something where other people choose to get the word out. And that's not easy, but once you see that system shift, it becomes really straightforward. So thank you for kicking us off. We have 1 here, and then we'll go back there. We have 2 here, and then we'll go back there. Howdy.
Hi, thank you. Piggybacking off of the last question, SEO and SEM are search engine optimization, search engine marketing are potentially on their way out unless there's some technological change. What I'm hearing about is AI optimization for websites. I don't know what that means, but I get the sense that there'll be agents that are crawling the internet on your behalf, doing work for you, finding deals, et cetera, information, whatever it might be.
Yep.
Have you come across this in practice yet, or is it still an idea?
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about how large language models like Perplexity, if you're not using Perplexity instead of Google, you got your money's worth just me telling you that. As soon as you get home, switch to Perplexity, your life will get better. Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, how do they work? I've been studying this since I was at Stanford with Doug Lenat in 1982. So we've been waiting for a long time for this. They don't know anything. They are always hallucinating. They are doing math problems that look like words. And our brains, the same way when you see a dog, you imagine that dog is thinking something like, that dog's mad at me, that dog's happy to see me. No, it's not. It's just a dog. This is like that. And so nobody, even the people who work there, nobody knows how it's really working. It's an extraordinarily complicated 43-dimensional math problem that goes in every direction and nobody knows. So if someone says, give me money and I will optimize your website for AI, they're taking advantage of you. What we know is that it's going to collect an enormous amount of data. And someone's going to match some searches and get some traffic from it. But it's also worth noting that even to this day, 20 to 30% of the searches on Google are searches that no one has ever done ever before. The tail, the long tail, the number of things people are searching for keeps getting longer and longer and longer and longer. So this is not a valid strategy. It's not a valid strategy to say, I'm going to win Perplexity, because Perplexity is going to keep reporting on me because I'm going to make my website smart enough to match that. I'm not going to say never, because technology keeps shifting, and a lot of marketers want this problem solved. But from what I understand about how it's fractionalizing, this isn't going to be the solution. The solution is going to be, if enough human beings talk about you on their social media platforms, they're going to be sending a signal that the AI can read. But reading your website, I don't think that's going to be sufficient for you to get the traffic that you want. So thank you. You had a question. Yes, hi.
This is specific to education, and you talked about change, and I see college education as one of the industries that need it's time for major updates.
Yeah.
But the system, once again, is against it. Do you have any thoughts on what young people can do, or what more so colleges do, to make education more valuable?
So what is school for? This is a fine question. I wrote a book about it. It's free. It's called Stop Stealing Dreams. And I challenge parents and school boards and even kids to say, what is school for? And no one has a good answer. And definitely they don't have the same answer. Is school to teach you to behave? Is school to get a certificate that gets you a job? Is school to fund the endowment so the investment office makes more money? There's lots of things school does. So before we say, we got to fix education, we have to have a conversation. Fix it to do what? Learning doesn't really happen in a lecture. And here I am lecturing, but it's going to happen because you teach yourself something. Learning happens when we do things. That's how you learned how to ride a bike and how you learned how to walk and almost everything else in your life. And we've developed all of these technologies that help people learn way more efficiently than going to Cambridge, Massachusetts and sitting in a room for 4 years. And institutions that are hundreds of years old serve many other functions, some of which we need, some of which we don't. Why do we have a football complex built on top of an educational complex? It's unclear. I mean, we can see how we got there, but I'm not sure most people would have signed up for it and how much it cost if they had seen it coming. So I can't answer your question, but I can tell you we're not asking the question often enough. And I think we are just months away from fairly famous colleges going bankrupt. Because the ones with a huge endowment are going to be here forever. And community colleges, which are fantastic, are going to be around. But that middle swath that are running out of money and running out of students and are in debt, there's nothing keeping them going because they're not serving the constituents the way that they used to. So we're going to see these massive shifts at the same time that new things are going to fill that spot. That the Khan Academy is a miracle. It's a miracle that millions and millions of people for free can learn anything they want. And if you spend some time with Claude, you could learn, if you sat down, you could learn to understand relativity in a day if you just asked it enough questions. It would say, pretend you're a patient teacher, and I'm going to ask you an infinite number of stupid questions. By the time you're done, you'll know it. That's impossible, and yet there it is for $20. So I think we need to have these conversations, and we're not having them yet. Thank you. We had someone back there who's been very patient, and then we'll move our way up. Harrison, how are you? I didn't see you in the shade there. It's good to see you. That's my Uncle Harris. You should say hi to him later.
Thank you,
Hi.
Seth, for coming. I really hope this qualifies as a good question. So
Okay.
I'm hoping there are other people in the audience who work with and have to work with their clients one at a time, customers, doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, financial advisors, insurance, with this. And I've listened to your stuff for a long time, and I've always struggled with how to apply it to that kind of a market as opposed to one where you can go out and sell pasta to 6 people at a time or millions of books or whatever it is. I'm wondering if you could maybe make the
if you don't
connection
mind,
for me.
if you get a little bit more specific, I think it would help people. What's a hard problem in the space you're talking about?
I think the hard problem is trying to figure out how to connect with many, many viable clients in a very trust-dependent industry, among all those things that I mentioned, have the same kind of a large impact in a short period of time without having to go person by person by person.
So how many people are you trying to have an impact with?
How many people you got?
Well, why is that? Why isn't there enough? How many would be enough?
I was told there would be no math. I take your point. I think you're talking about building trust one person at a time, tell one person.
I'm saying, so let's just assert for a minute that you're a high net worth financial advisor, right? If you're a high net worth financial advisor and you have 3 clients who can't live without you, you're not going to go bankrupt at that point. You're not going to be living in Greenwich, but you're not going to go bankrupt. But if you can serve those 3 people in such a way that their lives get better if they introduce you to their friends, they're going to introduce you to their friends because their lives are going to get better. And now you've got 6. And once you've got 6, you're on your way to 12. And once you have 60, you have too many. You can't serve them that way anymore anyway. So we're not talking about 6,000. We're talking about 60. But if you can be comfortable with the smallest viable audience. So in my case, when I started in the book business, I thought there was an infinite number of book editors, there was an infinite number of bookstores, and there were an infinite number of readers. And I just kept churning out book proposals because it didn't cost me anything until I could find somebody. And the first year I got 800 rejections in a row. I sold my first book the first day with Chip Conley for $5,000, and then I got 800 rejections in a row. Because I was a wandering generality. I was running around saying, if you need a book, I got a book. And I came to the conclusion there were only 6 people in New York City that needed to trust me. If there were 6 people who could count on me to deliver the thing they needed, I would be fine. And all I did for the next 5 years after that, when I built the whole industry that I was in, was work with these 6 people. And if I wasn't for them, I could say, I'm not for you. Thank you so much. Bye. But if I had to have this mindset of more, I would be a wandering generality, constantly trying to vamp. How do I reach a lot of people, but not one at a time? And the long tail makes it clear. It even works for hit music, right? If you can't get 20 people in a nightclub to come back to hear you tomorrow night, you got a problem with your music, because you're not going to get on the radio, because there is no radio. You're going to have to figure out how to matter to 20 people if you want to end up building a music video that gets seen by 1 billion people. So that's where I begin. I just keep coming back to what's the smallest viable audience? What's the smallest number of people? It might be 1 million, but it's probably 6. That if I mattered to them, it would be enough. And then everything after that is a bonus.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let you start picking who we're calling on, because there's so many good questions. Thanks, Siobhan.
So my question is about the attention economy, and what you're touching on has always been, there's so much noise and so much distraction, and it's all about reaching as many people as possible, less about mattering. So do you see any ends in sight to that? And I guess, is there any true strategy to opting out of all of it?
Opting out as a maker or as a consumer?
I guess both, actually. I'm interested in both. I mean, if you can just touch on it.
So it's always been true. It's just at a different scale. Does anybody here remember Bishop Fulton Sheen? Right? You're giving your age away, right? I remember him just barely. Fulton Sheen in 1963 was one of the most famous people in the United States. Every night, every Sunday, 30 million people watch this guy preach in these flamboyant red robes and stuff. A friend of mine got the rights to all of his old footage in the 80s and asked me to help him. And we couldn't give it away because people didn't care about him at all. Because he, in the moment, was famous, but he was famous because he had someone else's spectrum. And he hadn't actually earned a sinecure. And if you try to talk to a teenager about I Dream of Jeannie or some other show that we grew up with, they're like, their eyes roll. They're not interested. There's always been that sort of super popular fluff on the top. And it's not going away. The difference now is there aren't 3 TV channels. Every single day, there's 3,000 things that everybody's talking about. 3,000. And you're not aware of all of them, but you're seeing the foam that your circle is seeing. And every once in a while, someone gets popular on TikTok or whatever, and we're jealous. If that could just happen to me. Except, guy I know got 42 million views for a TikTok he did, and he sold 3 copies of his book. And that's not made up, that's true. 3 copies, 42 million views. So the question is, what are we doing it for? If you want to be part of the circus circle, then go be in the circus. And that's what this is. It's a circus. But it's not leading to the kind of mattering that we're talking about. So if you're a maker, you got to pick your customers, and that picks your future. When you decide who you're here for, you've now decided what you're going to do and how you're going to talk about it and how much you're going to charge and all the other pieces that go with it. So if you go to my wife's bakery, which is 2 blocks from here, and say, I love your stuff, will you make me something with gluten in it? The clerk will say, thank you for coming, but we don't do that. There's another bakery down the street. If she didn't do that, she'd just be another average bakery. If you want to be the best gluten-free bakery in America, you have to say, no, I'm sorry, we don't do that. If someone walks in and says, do you have anything with no sugar in it? They'll say, the place down the street will sell you a banana. But no, we don't make that. Pick your customers, pick your future. If you're a freelancer, this becomes even more important because you can't scale what you're doing. Freelancers that just want to be busy, lawyers who just want to be busy, take whatever client walks in. But doing a good job with bad clients isn't the way you get good clients. You get good clients by becoming the kind of freelancer that good clients want to hire. Good clients pay you more, challenge you more, talk about you more, take you to better places. But that only happens if you become the kind of freelancer that good clients want to hire, ignoring the circus. And so the discipline of that is difficult, but it's totally doable. Like my blog, I hit 10,000 posts a couple months ago. Not one of my posts has won the internet. Not one of them was the viral post that everyone was talking about. That's great. Because if that had happened to me once, I would still be chasing it. Because it's super cool when it happens, because all these people run over, right? But then you start putting link bait in, and then you start being controversial. You start doing things to get it to happen again. And that's not what Joni Mitchell did. And it's not what you need to do. You need to do this work that you're proud of for the people you're trying to serve, and you'll be fine. Ignore the rest. Thanks. Yes, we have this guy. I'm not picking anybody anymore. I made a mistake. Sorry. Hi.
Hi, thanks, Seth. So how quickly do you think we're moving towards, trust in sort of the AI-generated information? Because on one hand, right, you mentioned Khan Academy with 5 million people, right, which I think is all pretty much AI.
No, zero.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. Versus, Wall Street Journal or New York Times getting in trouble around, AI-generated content, and there's calls on YouTube for AI-generated content to be labeled. I mean, in 5 years, are we going to even care?
5 months, we're not going to.
Yeah.
So let's go back in time just a little bit. When Thomas Edison was having his fight with George Westinghouse over AC versus DC, which is a fight that Edison lost, he had a press conference and he electrocuted an elephant to show how dangerous electricity was. The first home appliance that caught on was the washing machine, because it's a lousy chore. And there were no electrical outlets in homes. There was just one, it was called the Edison mount. You'd unscrew it. And you could screw in during the day, and the bulb was hot, right? You'd have to screw in your washing machine. Washing machines are very difficult to balance, so they would rock. And the first year that they were popular, more than a dozen people were strangled to death by their washing machine, because it would rock around the thing and then wrap it around. And there were all these businesses that said, oh, this is newfangled. We're electricity free. There are no businesses now that brag about the fact that they use electricity, right? All businesses use electricity. Well, the same thing is happening to AI really, really fast. So should you trust everything you read or see? Of course not. And you shouldn't have before we had this conversation. AI hallucinates all the time. And sometimes it writes better than me. Often it writes worse than me. I made the commitment that every word I published with my name on it was written by me. Not my staff, because I don't have any staff, not an AI, but by me. But that's a choice, because I just wanted to stand for that. But there's nothing wrong with using an electric typewriter, nothing wrong with using a spell check. It's not morally incorrect to use AI. At some point, though, someone needs to be responsible. And that's where it's going to get interesting, is how are we going to be able to follow a trail back and say, who made this and why? And we're going to have a real problem, and I think it's going to get way worse before it gets better. Last little bit of history. Shortly after Gutenberg came out with the first mass Bible, Europe burned down to the ground. Because for the first time, people could read without an intermediary the Bible. So there wasn't a priest telling them what it said. They could read it. And so there were all these people who showed up and said, I'm a prophet. There were all these people who showed up interpreting it. And whole cities burned to the ground because of the riots. And when AI is combined with the internet, and people can make videos that you can't tell don't have people in them, and they do writing that you can't tell a person wrote, or the person didn't write, we're going to have this hollowing out of our shared reality. And then we will go back to a different thing. But we should be aware of it. We should tell our kids it's coming, and it's happening right this minute. I put a video on my post, on my blog 2 weeks ago. Go look at it. It's very scary to see these things that look a lot like people, that aren't people, saying things that a person never said. It's going to happen. Now what are we going to do? But the answer isn't going to be a warning label. That's not going to solve the problem. I'm hoping someone will ask me a question where I can have an enthusiastic, positive answer.
So I'm going to stand, even though I'm very nervous, I'm going to stand. And if I could put something into context first before I ask my question. And it relates to everything that you're actually just now talking about. Just so everybody kind of knows, I don't know if anybody in here was in the TV and film business, but I was. And it was something I always wanted to do as a child. And I did.
I'm going to ask you to try to make it a
I'm
little
going to keep it quick.
Great.
So what I'm kind of getting at is that the old Hollywood model has essentially died. And a lot of people that are in the film and TV industry are freaked out because, to your point, they're looking at, well, the system taught me to work this way, and this is how I should be doing. In my position, what I decided to do is I've created a venture on my own, and it goes back to what matters to me. So I created a YouTube channel. I've been up since 4. That's why I'm a little delirious. I edit 3 videos a day, and I post them. I have, what it is for me, it's topics that matter. And it's subjects that matter on that. I use AI.
Can I just push you just like...
Yes,
I
and all
need
the
a question.
imagery is AI and everything
Right.
else. What I'm just kind of getting at is, to that point in terms of promotion or things like that, what can I do as somebody who is in that particular model? You know, the numbers and statistics are good in terms of what
Right,
happens.
but why would someone watching it believe that they would benefit by sharing it with someone else?
I guess it's because
That's,
of the
you don't have
subject
to have an
matter.
answer,
Right.
but that's the question,
Yeah.
right? So when the Ice Bucket Challenge spread, it didn't spread because people cared about ALS. It spread because their status went up by spreading it. People care about status and affiliation. That's it. People like us do things like this. Who eats lunch first? If I share something that's interesting and cutting edge with a friend of mine, I look more interesting and cutting edge. But you don't get to tell me it's interesting and cutting edge. I have to decide that. So that's where the point of view comes in, right? Up there, yes? Siobhan pointed to somebody. Hi.
Hi. First, thank you for the analogy of the surfer and the golfer. Appreciate that one. It's one I'm going to use. If you look at strategy and people who do strategic thinking, the topic of serendipity gets treated in different ways. Sometimes they'll say with the right strategy, serendipity doesn't mean anything. Others will say it means everything. How does serendipity play into your thinking?
Okay, so let's talk about decisions. This is from my friend Annie Duke. Annie used to be the world poker champion. Show of hands, if in the last 6 months you made a good decision, at least one good decision, raise your hand. Beautiful. I'm happy for you. Now, honestly, did that decision you made turn out well? Did it have a good outcome? Raise your hand. Everyone raises their hand because that's your definition of a good decision. I did something and it turned out well. These are unrelated. If you buy a lottery ticket and you win the lottery, you made a bad decision and you got lucky. But they're not related events. If you make a good decision, you go out on a picnic on a beautiful day, but a meteor hits the park and everything is covered with dirt, you got unlucky, but you made a good decision. A good decision is simply based on where you are and what you see and what you know and the probabilities in front of you. Did you do what a good decision maker would have done? If the answer is yes, you made a good decision. But because we conflate the two and believe that good decisions always have good outcomes, we now believe that making a decision involves predicting the future. It doesn't. And that frees us up to be able to accept responsibility for the decision part, but not for the outcome part. And in business, too often, almost, in fact, every time, you don't see CEOs say, I made a bad decision, but I got lucky. They don't do that. They just announce that whatever made them lucky was their choice. They knew it all along, and the opposite is also the case. So when I think about strategy and probability, what we've got here is this. Probability is just knowing how the deck is stacked. If I've played 38 cards in blackjack and not one ace has shown up, and I make a bet that there's going to be an ace, that's a good decision because I know how the deck is stacked. If an ace doesn't show up, it doesn't mean I made a bad decision. It just means I didn't get lucky. So that's what I think of when I think of serendipity and strategy. You've got to be able to talk about it. If you can't talk about your strategy before the fact and after, then you're just stumbling along and hoping to get lucky. And when I was in Silicon Valley, that was 98% of the people I met. 98% of the people I met could not describe their strategy. They could not explain why they were doing this instead of that. They could not explain what needed to happen for the next door to open. They just felt like talking about it would jinx their belief that spinning the wheel was the best they could hope for. And I think we can do better than that because we can learn to see the strategy. What else we got? Okay, thank you, Siobhan.
Thanks, great talk.
Thank you.
So you want us to take up our agency and make change. I want to maybe ask you about the question of power. Because and think of the context of an organization. You got multiple interests, right? Everybody's got a strategy, but only one strategy is probably going to get executed. So it's a tournament of strategies inside a company, right?
I disagree with that, but that's a great way to start. Keep going.
Why does Boeing make planes that fall out of the sky? Because some people pushed it into accelerating new product development in a way that was risky. Why does Wells Fargo have 1 million fictitious accounts? Because the retail bank got pushed into cross-selling, right? So can you add a dimension to this around the narrative and who wins and who loses?
Yeah, this is great. There's a lot of juice in this. I'm going to start by saying strategy and tactics are different things. Most companies think that tactics are their strategy. They're not. Most companies, their only strategy is let's do what we did yesterday but faster and cheaper. And then they keep inventing tactics. Strategic planning is an oxymoron because planning implies that if you follow all the steps, it's going to work. And that's just execution of tactics. Strategy is a philosophy of becoming, and then you trust the organization to come up with a series of tactics to support the strategy. So the challenge is not that companies have a lot of strategies. They generally have none or too few strategies, but they have tactics that they've leaned into. So if you think about the Ritz-Carlton hotels, their strategy is to build a luxury hotel that people will pay extra for, even though they're still buying a room that is dark and quiet. Why will they pay extra for that? Because the brand offers status and affiliation and a certain kind of customer service that they believe is worth the money. So what tactics can you use to execute that other than clever commercials? Well, what they realized is that the people on the front lines, the people who notice the customers the most, are the hardworking people who make up the rooms. And so they said to their frontline staff, with training, here is $2,000 in hotel credits per customer that you can spend anytime you want, any way you want, and we will never challenge you for doing it. And if you don't do it, you're going to get in trouble. So when you overhear a couple complaining about something in the hotel, just turn to them and say, your room's on us tonight. Once you start that cycle, you have thousands of people coming up with new tactics to support one strategy. So the problem they had at Boeing was the strategy itself might have been valid, but they didn't create the conditions, the feedback loops, to reward their managers to be tactical at executing that strategy. They did a bad job of executing what needed to happen to support the strategy. The thing at Wells Fargo is they didn't rely on people's moral compass or reward their moral compass. Instead, they pushed people to act in ways that they weren't proud of in order to make metrics go up. And the metrics are the problem, the false proxy. False proxies are things that are easy to measure but not useful. So if you're hiring a programmer, don't ask how many words per minute they can type. It's not a useful proxy. If you're hiring a lawyer who went to law school 20 years ago, asking where they went to law school is not helpful because it's not going to tell you anything about whether they can do the job or not. I talked to a guy, he told me after he'd heard me rant about this, that at his company, the last 6 people they had hired, 6, had each been captain of their Ivy League tennis team. That's an error, right? That's a lazy false proxy. If you're hiring people who look like you, if you're hiring people who present like you in an interview, you're not actually hiring for the change you seek to make. You're just relying on a cheap false proxy. And so when I think about companies that lose their way, mostly it's they either had a lazy short-term strategy designed to make the stock price go up for a while, or they failed to execute because they relied on false proxies. And being able to talk about this, again, is the key, because we've got to be able to get the people in the room who have power to be able to talk to each other about, yeah, but what is your strategy? Why are you doing this? Don't tell me you'll know it when you see it. And don't tell me you hope we'll get lucky. Explain to me why. So when I was at Yahoo, their strategy, which was perfect for the kind of post-prodigy internet that we were in, was the internet's this wide open, sort of darkly lit place. Come to Yahoo, stay at Yahoo. So the homepage of Yahoo had 183 links on it, I counted. And Google came along after Yahoo. And Google said, someone turned on the lights, and the internet's a lot more hospitable. The open internet sort of works. So come to Google and leave. And the Google homepage had 2 links. And so when Jeff Mallett at Yahoo looked at the acquisition of Google, he's like, this doesn't make sense to me. They're telling everyone to leave. That's never going to work, because he was looking at the world through his strategy lens, but the world had changed, and the new strategy lens is what needed to take its place. And that is what's missing from so many of these conversations. So I'm just going to keep talking until Siobhan tells me to stop. But what's happening? One last question. Okay.
Thank you.
Hi.
When would you decide to use a more empirical-based way to convince someone to make change as opposed to a more emotional-based method?
What a great question. This is being asked to someone who made it through business school without once doing the spreadsheets at the back of the cases. Not once. I can't recall one time someone I know and respect changed their mind because of empirical evidence. Let me give you a couple examples. They figured out and proved that ulcers are not caused by pastrami sandwiches. They're caused by bacteria. And not one gastroenterologist of significance changed how they acted for more than 10 years. That a doctor in Switzerland proved clinically in the 1920s that goiter, which is one of the most horrible diseases you could ever Google, which was afflicting 20% of the people in Switzerland, that goiter could be cured by 2 drops of iodine. Proved it. It took 15 years before the medical establishment in Switzerland adopted it, because this doctor was a country doctor, wasn't a city doctor. I published a paper with a cardiologist about how to deal with the crisis of kidney transplants. We were running out of kidneys. And in 3 pages, we proved we had the right answer. And because I wasn't willing to go on the talk circuit and Jonathan wasn't able to, we're still doing it the old way. Because empirical data doesn't change people's minds. People change their own minds. And they change their minds based on the story they tell themselves. Some people tell themselves a story based on empirical data. So we have to bring those people empirical data, because that's how they're going to tell themselves a story. But we got to know it's the story that causes human beings to shift. And that story is generally about, what do people like us do? What's going to help my status? What's going to help me fit in? What's the standard right now? And we can use numbers and proof to be the foundation of that. But if you forget to tell the story, and they can't figure out how to tell themselves a story, no change is going to happen. So I'm going to be around to sign books. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the ruckus you make. Appreciate you. Thank you.